I thought grief was quiet until the day 10 men in black suits stood in perfect silence around my father's grave. The morning air was 39 degrees, sharp enough to sting my lungs as I stepped out of my car and saw them forming a circle around the gray headstone that still felt too new, too clean, too permanent. Their shoes were polished, their coats tailored, their posture disciplined like they were guarding something sacred instead of a man who had spent 30 years doing tax returns at a corner office with flickering lights. My father was ordinary. He drank weak coffee, watched baseball on Sundays, and fell asleep in his recliner before the ninth inning. Ordinary men do not get ceremonial silence. Ordinary men do not get 10 strangers who move in unison. I froze halfway up the gravel path, my boots crunching too loud in the stillness. One of the men glanced at me, but said nothing. They didn't look threatening. They looked respectful. That terrified me more. Then I heard the low hum of an engine behind me. A black Bentley rolled to a slow stop along the curb, glossy as spilled ink under the pale sky. The driver stepped out first, then opened the rear door with deliberate care. The man who emerged didn't rush. He didn't need to. He was tall, maybe 6'3", dark coat perfectly fitted across broad shoulders, movements controlled, economical. His presence shifted the air. The men in black straightened almost imperceptibly as he approached the headstone. He didn't look at me. Not at first. He stopped inches from my father's name engraved in stone. Michael Hayes, beloved father, gone too soon. The tall man removed a black leather glove, reached into his coat pocket, and placed a simple ring at the base of the grave. No speech, no prayer, just one quiet sentence. Debt is paid. The words landed heavier than the winter sky. I found my voice before I found my courage. Excuse me. It came out smaller than I intended. He turned then, and his eyes met mine. Cool, assessing, not cruel but not gentle either. Green, like storm water before it breaks. You're Charlotte Hayes, he said, not asking. My stomach dropped. How do you know my name? He studied me for a long second, like he was measuring something invisible. Your father was a good man. My chest tightened. You knew him? A pause. Controlled. Careful. He saved my life. The world tilted slightly, like I'd stepped off a curb I hadn't seen. That's impossible, I said automatically. My dad was an accountant. A flicker crossed his expression, almost regret. Your father was many things. A gust of wind swept across the cemetery, rattling the bare branches overhead. I looked back at the ring resting against the stone, simple, unadorned, deliberate. Nothing about this felt random. Nothing about this felt ordinary. For the first time since the funeral, I realized something cold and electric beneath my grief. I didn't know my father at all. I should have walked away, but my feet felt anchored to the frozen ground. The men in black remained perfectly still, their attention subtly shifting between the tall stranger and me, as if waiting for instructions that had not yet been spoken. The wind brushed a strand of hair across my face, and I tucked it behind my ear just to give my hand something to do. You are mistaken, I said, forcing steadiness into my voice. My father never mentioned you. He never mentioned saving anyone. The man glanced back at the headstone, at the ring resting against the carved letters of my father's name. He would not have, he replied. His tone was calm, controlled, the kind of voice that did not rise because it never needed to. He protected you from that part of his life. A hollow sound escaped my throat before I could stop it. There was no part, I insisted. He went to work at 8 in the morning. He came home at 6. He complained about property taxes and the cost of gas. That was his life. The stranger finally stepped closer, closing the distance between us by a few feet, not threatening, but deliberate. Up close, I noticed the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, the kind earned by responsibility rather than age. Your father met me 14 years ago, he said, in a moment that could have ended very differently. 14 years ago. I was 12. I tried to remember anything unusual from that time. I remembered braces. A science fair. The summer we painted the house pale blue. Nothing about secret meetings or hidden debts. You are asking me to believe that my father lived some kind of double life. I said quietly. I am telling you he made a choice, he answered. A choice that cost him more than you know. My chest tightened at that. He died of a heart attack, I said. That is what the doctors said. The man held my gaze without blinking. Yes, he said simply. And stress has a way of finding those who carry too much alone. Something about the way he said alone made my stomach twist. I thought of the late nights when I would find my father at the kitchen table long after midnight, paperwork spread around him, glasses low on his nose. I had assumed it was work. I had assumed it was worry about bills. I had never asked more. "Why are you here?" I asked, my voice softer now. "Because I do not forget," he replied. "Your father stood between me and consequences that would have followed me for the rest of my life. He asked for nothing in return except one promise." My heartbeat quickened. What promise? For the first time, his expression shifted. Not weakness, not fear, something closer to respect. "That if the day ever came when you stood alone," he said, "I would make sure you were not." The words settled over me heavier than the cold. Alone. I had felt alone since the funeral, since the house went quiet, since every room echoed differently without him. "I do not need protection," I said automatically, even though I was not sure that was true. He gave a slight nod, as if he expected the response. "Most people do not believe they do," he said. A car passed slowly along the cemetery road, its engine humming before fading into the distance. I suddenly became aware of how exposed we were, how open the space felt despite the wide sky above us. "You still have not told me your name," I said. He studied me for a moment longer, then answered, "Adrian Romano." The name meant nothing and everything at once. It sounded like power. It sounded like something my father would never have spoken out loud. And yet here we were, standing beside his grave, bound together by a promise I had never known existed. The name lingered between us like a door left slightly open. Adrian Romano. I repeated it silently, testing how it felt in my mind, and it felt heavy, like something that carried weight in rooms I had never stepped into. "Why would my father trust you with a promise like that?" I asked. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. The men in black remained several yards away, respectful but present, a quiet reminder that Adrian did not move through the world alone. He glanced toward them briefly before answering. "Because he believed in second chances," he said, "even for men who did not deserve them." I searched his face for arrogance, for cruelty, for any sign that this was some elaborate performance. Instead, I saw something controlled, restrained, almost careful. "You are speaking in riddles," I said. "I need facts." Adrian nodded once, as if he appreciated the demand. 14 years ago, I was in a position that would have defined the rest of my life. Your father intervened. He did not do it for money. He did not do it for influence. He did it because he believed a mistake should not determine who someone becomes. My heart pounded against my ribs. My father had always believed that about me. When I failed my driving test the first time, when I changed my major halfway through college, he would say, "This moment does not decide you, Charlotte." I swallowed. What exactly did he intervene in? I asked. Adrian's jaw tightened slightly, not in anger, but in memory. He provided evidence that shifted responsibility away from me and toward the truth, he said carefully. Without him, I would not be standing here today. The wind picked up again, colder now, brushing against the back of my neck. "And what did that cost him?" I asked. Adrian looked at the headstone again, at the dates carved in granite. "Respect from people who do not forgive easily," he said. "Pressure that does not disappear." He never told you because he did not want that weight on your shoulders. I thought of the nights I had heard him pacing in the hallway outside my bedroom. The way he would check the locks twice before going to bed. I had assumed he was just cautious. "You are telling me my father carried something alone for 14 years, I said quietly. "Yes," Adrian replied. "And he carried it well." A strange mix of pride and anger surged through me. Pride that my father had been braver than I knew. Anger that he had never trusted me with the truth. "You said he asked for one promise," I reminded him. "That if I ever stood alone, you would make sure I was not." Adrian met my eyes again, steady and unflinching. "You are alone now," he said. "Your house is quiet. The bills are addressed only to you. And there are people who remember what your father did." A chill ran deeper than the weather. "What people?" I asked. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough that only I could hear. "People who do not see debt the way I do," he said. "People who believe loyalty should never change direction." My breath caught. "Are you saying someone blames him?" Adrian's gaze sharpened. "I am saying that sometimes gratitude is not universal." The words settled like frost. For the first time, I understood that this was not just about the past. It was about what might still be coming. I looked down at the ring resting against my father's grave, simple and dark against the pale stone. If you are here to repay a debt, I said slowly, then what happens when it is fully paid? Adrian's expression did not waver. Debts like this, he said quietly, are not settled with one visit to a grave. The silence after his words felt heavier than anything he had said before. Debts like this are not settled with one visit to a grave. The sentence echoed in my chest, steady and unhurried, as if it had been waiting for years to be spoken. I wrapped my arms around myself, not because of the cold, but because something inside me had shifted. You are implying this is ongoing, I said carefully. That whatever my father did is still active. Adrian watched me with that same measured intensity. Choices create ripples, he replied. Some fade. Some travel farther than expected. I let out a breath that fogged in the air between us. You keep speaking in metaphors. I need clarity. He studied me for a long moment, as if deciding how much truth I could carry at once. Then he reached into the inside pocket of his coat and withdrew a small envelope. It was cream-colored, edges slightly worn, my name written across the front in handwriting I recognized instantly. My throat closed. That is my father's writing, I whispered. Adrian held the envelope carefully, not offering it yet. He gave this to me 12 years ago, he said. He told me to keep it sealed unless the day came when you were alone in the world. My pulse roared in my ears. You have had that for 12 years? I asked. Yes. And you are just giving it to me now? His gaze did not waver. Because now the condition has been met. The words landed like a quiet verdict. I stared at the envelope as if it might disappear. My name curved across it in the same ink he used to sign birthday cards, the same steady hand that taught me how to hold a pen. Why did he not give it to me himself? I asked. Because he believed he would outlive the need, Adrian said softly. A sharp ache spread through my chest at that. My father had always planned for the future. Retirement at 65. A road trip across Route 66. He had never planned on leaving early. What else did he leave with you? I asked. Adrian hesitated only a fraction of a second. Information, he said. Safeguards. Names that should never reach your ears unless absolutely necessary. A chill ran along my spine. You make it sound like I am in danger. Adrian stepped slightly to the side, subtly placing himself between me and the open road beyond the cemetery gates. The movement was instinctive, protective without being dramatic. I make it sound like you deserve awareness, he said. There are individuals who have long memories. Your father disrupted expectations. Some consider that unforgivable. I swallowed. And you? I asked. What do you consider it? For the first time, something unguarded flickered in his eyes. I consider it loyalty of the highest order, he said. He stood for what he believed was right, even when it was inconvenient. I thought of my father teaching me to return extra change at the grocery store, insisting integrity was not situational. The memory felt different now, deeper. If I take that envelope, I said slowly, does that mean I accept whatever world this is? Adrian finally extended it toward me. It means you accept the truth your father trusted you with, he said. The paper trembled slightly in my fingers as I reached out. It felt impossibly light for something that carried 12 years of silence. I looked up at him once more before breaking the seal. If I open this, I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. There is no going back to ordinary, is there? Adrian's answer was quiet, certain, and without hesitation. There never was. My fingers hovered over the seal longer than I expected. The envelope felt fragile, like it might crumble if I pressed too hard, like the truth inside had been waiting for air. I slid my thumb beneath the flap and broke it open slowly, the sound soft but final. The paper inside was folded twice, neat, deliberate. I recognized the weight of it before I even unfolded it. My father had always chosen thicker stationery, said it made words feel important. I drew in a breath and began to read. Charlotte, if you are holding this, then I did not get the chance to explain everything myself. That line alone made my vision blur. I blinked hard and kept going. There are moments in life when doing what is right costs more than doing what is easy. I made a choice years ago to protect someone who deserved the opportunity to become better than his circumstances. I did not do it for power or for gain. I did it because I hoped that if you are ever judged for a mistake, someone will see your potential instead of your worst moment. My hands trembled slightly. I could hear Adrian's steady breathing nearby, feel his presence without looking at him. The letter continued. The world you believe I lived in is true. I was an accountant. I was your father. But there was a day when I stood at a crossroads and chose to step into a situation that was not mine because I believed it was necessary. That choice created tension I have carried quietly. I kept you unaware because innocence is a gift that should not be taken lightly. A tear slipped down my cheek before I could stop it. I wiped it away impatiently and kept reading. If circumstances ever place you in contact with Adrian Romano, understand that he carries a debt not of obligation, but of honor. He is not a perfect man. No one is. But I have seen his capacity for change. If you are alone, allow him to stand where I no longer can. My chest tightened so. Sharply I had to steady myself. The final lines were written slightly darker, as if he had pressed harder with the pen. You are stronger than you realize, Charlotte. Do not let fear shape your decisions. Let integrity guide you. That has always been our family's true inheritance. I lowered the letter slowly, the cemetery around me feeling different now, less like a place of endings and more like a doorway I had just stepped through. I looked up at Adrian, my eyes searching his face for something I could name. He trusted you, I said, my voice unsteady but clear. Adrian gave a small nod, not triumphant, not proud. He did, he answered quietly. I glanced back at the headstone, at the ring resting against the granite, at the men standing several yards away in respectful silence. My father had lived a life I understood, and another I had never seen. The realization did not break me the way I expected. It reshaped me. I folded the letter carefully and held it against my chest, feeling the steady beat of my heart behind it. For the first time since the funeral, the emptiness inside me shifted into something else. Not certainty, not peace, but direction. And when I met Adrian's gaze again, I realized the promise written in ink was no longer theoretical. It was standing 3 feet in front of me. I did not realize how much my hands were shaking until Adrian gently reached forward and steadied the edge of the letter before it slipped from my grip. The gesture was subtle, respectful, as if he understood that this was not just paper but a bridge between who I had been and who I was becoming. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back inside the envelope, pressing it flat against my coat like I could anchor myself with it. The cemetery felt quieter now, the air thinner, as if something had been spoken that could not be taken back. If he trusted you, I said slowly, meeting Adrian's gaze again, then I need to know what that trust requires of me. His expression did not harden, but it sharpened. It requires awareness, he answered. Nothing more today. Today. The word carried weight. And tomorrow? I asked. A faint breath left him, almost thoughtful. Tomorrow depends on whether those who disagreed with your father's decision decide to revisit it. A tightness formed in my chest. You keep saying that, I said. Who exactly disagreed? Adrian glanced briefly toward the men standing several yards away. They remained composed, scanning the open grounds with quiet vigilance. There are individuals who value consistency above growth, he said. They believe loyalty should remain fixed, even when circumstances change. I thought about the word loyalty and how my father had always defined it differently. Loyalty to principles, not to fear. Loyalty to what is right, not what is convenient. And you changed, I said quietly. It was not a question. Adrian's eyes held mine, steady and unflinching. Yes, he said simply. Your father ensured that I had the opportunity to. The honesty in that answer unsettled me more than evasion would have. A car door closed softly somewhere beyond the trees, the sound distant but clear in the still air. I realized how exposed we were, how open the space felt despite the rows of granite markers. Are we safe here? I asked before I could stop myself. Adrian's gaze swept the perimeter once more before returning to me. For now, he said. Not reassuring. Not alarming. Just factual. I tightened my grip on the envelope. If someone wanted to challenge the past, I said carefully, why would they involve me? Adrian stepped slightly closer, lowering his voice. Because you are what your father protected, he said. And symbols carry meaning. The word symbol echoed inside me. I had been living my life believing I was ordinary, anonymous. Now I was apparently something else entirely. I did not ask for this, I whispered. Adrian's expression softened, just barely. Neither did he replied. The simplicity of that answer stilled something inside me. My father had not chosen complexity for himself. He had chosen it for me. I drew in a steady breath. What do you expect from me right now? I asked. Nothing, Adrian said. Except that you do not face uncertainty alone. The men in black began to move subtly, not breaking formation but preparing, as if an unspoken signal had passed between them. Adrian extended his hand toward me, not demanding, not commanding, offering. Come, he said quietly. We should leave before this moment becomes public. I hesitated only a second before placing my hand in his. His grip was firm but careful, a steadying presence rather than a force. As we walked toward the black Bentley, I glanced back once more at the headstone, at the ring resting against cold stone, at the space where my father's quiet life and hidden choice had collided. I had come to the cemetery expecting grief. I was leaving with something far more complicated. And as the car door closed beside me, sealing out the cold, I understood that whatever my father had set in motion years ago had just reached me. The door closed with a muted thud, sealing me inside a world that felt several degrees removed from the one I had known 30 minutes ago. The leather seat beneath me was cool and smooth, the faint scent of cedar and something darker filling the air. Through the tinted window, I watched the cemetery shrink behind us, rows of headstones blurring into gray as the car eased onto the main road. Adrian sat beside me, not crowding, not distant, his posture relaxed but alert. The driver pulled away without unnecessary speed, just steady motion, as if urgency did not need to be loud to be real. I kept the envelope in my lap, my fingers tracing the indentation of my name through the paper. Where are we going? I asked quietly. Adrian glanced at me, his expression measured. Somewhere private, he said. Somewhere we can speak without interruption. I turned toward the window again, watching storefronts and traffic lights pass by in familiar patterns. Everything outside looked normal. A woman walked her dog. A man carried groceries into a townhouse. Life continued as if nothing had shifted. Inside the car, everything had. You said symbols carry meaning, I said after a moment. If I am a symbol, what does that make you? Adrian's jaw tightened slightly, but his voice remained even. A reminder, he said, of a decision that altered more than one life. I studied him in profile, the controlled stillness, the way he seemed accustomed to being observed. Do you regret it? I asked. His eyes flicked toward mine. No, he answered without hesitation. The certainty in that single word settled heavily in the space between us. Then why does this feel like something unresolved? I pressed. Adrian leaned back slightly, considering. Because others prefer outcomes that serve them, he said. Your father chose an outcome that served integrity. The word integrity echoed in my mind, pulled straight from the letter still resting against my coat. I thought of my father's quiet lectures about doing the right thing even when no one was watching. Apparently, someone had been watching. The car slowed at a red light, sunlight briefly illuminating the interior before fading again. I noticed how Adrian's attention shifted subtly to the side mirrors, to the cars around us, to reflections in glass storefronts. Not anxious. Aware. Are we being followed? I asked softly. He did not look at me this time. Not at the moment, he said. The phrasing was precise enough to make my pulse quicken. I swallowed. This is not the life I chose, I said. Adrian turned toward me fully now, his gaze steady. It is not a life, he said quietly. It is a crossroads. The red light changed. The car moved forward again. I let that settle inside me. A crossroads. My father had stood at 114 years ago and chosen a direction that shaped both our futures. Now I was sitting beside the man connected to that choice, heading toward a place I had never seen, carrying a letter that had redrawn the map of my past. I pressed my palm flat against the envelope, grounding myself in the weight of paper and ink. If this is a crossroads, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, then I need to understand every path. Adrian gave a slight nod, as if he had been waiting for that sentence. Then you will, he said. And as the city skyline rose ahead of us, sharp against the afternoon sky, I realized that understanding might cost more than ignorance ever had. The car turned off the main avenue and slipped into a quieter part of the city where glass towers gave way to older brick buildings renovated into something discreet and expensive. We pulled into an underground garage beneath a building that did not have a name on the outside, only a polished steel address number beside the entrance. The gate lifted without hesitation as if it had been expecting us. I felt that again, that subtle shift in reality, the sense that doors opened in Adrian's world without knocking. The car rolled to a stop in a reserved space near a private elevator. One of the men from the cemetery stepped forward to open my door, his expression neutral, professional. I stepped out slowly, the concrete floor cool beneath my boots, the echo of footsteps sharp in the enclosed space. Adrian moved beside me, close enough to guide but not touch. The elevator door slid open at his approach. Inside, the walls were mirrored steel, reflecting a version of myself I barely recognized. My cheeks were pale from the cold, my eyes brighter, sharper. I looked like someone standing on the edge of something irreversible. "You do this often?" I asked as the elevator rose smoothly, numbers lighting up one by one. "Bring strangers into private buildings?" Adrian's mouth curved slightly, not quite a smile. "You are not a stranger," he said. "You are the daughter of a man I owe." The distinction unsettled me. The elevator stopped with a soft chime. The doors opened into a space that was quiet and expansive, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline, afternoon light stretching across polished wood floors. It did not look like the headquarters of something dangerous. It looked controlled, intentional, a space where decisions were made without chaos. I stepped inside, my senses alert. "This is your office?" I asked. "Part of it," he replied. He removed his coat and set it over the back of a chair with precise movements. "You wanted clarity." I nodded, tightening my grip on the envelope. "Start with this," I said. "What exactly did my father prevent 14 years ago?" Adrian did not answer immediately. He walked toward the window, looking out over the city as if measuring the distance between past and present. "There was a transaction," he said finally. "One that would have placed responsibility on me for something I did not authorize." I crossed my arms, waiting. "Your father uncovered inconsistencies," Adrian continued. "He brought them forward before assumptions hardened into consequences." His words were careful, but the implication was clear. My father had stepped into a situation that could have defined Adrian permanently, and others wanted those assumptions to stand, I said quietly. Adrian turned back toward me. "Yes," he said, "it would have simplified certain ambitions." A chill moved through me that had nothing to do with temperature. "So my father complicated someone's plan?" I said. "He corrected it," Adrian replied evenly. Silence settled between us again, heavier now that walls enclosed it. I looked around the room, at the city stretching beyond the glass, at the calm order of everything inside. "And those people who preferred the simpler version?" I asked slowly. "They still exist." Adrian's gaze did not waver. "Yes." The honesty in that answer steadied me more than reassurance would have. I walked toward the window and looked out at the grid of streets below, cars moving in neat lines, people unaware of the quiet currents beneath their routine. "If I had never come to the cemetery today," I said softly, "would you have told me any of this?" Adrian stepped closer, his reflection appearing beside mine in the glass. "I would have," he said, "because your father asked me to make sure you were never blindsided." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting that settle. Blindsided. That was what ignorance felt like now. And standing there, with the skyline spread out below us, I realized the crossroads he spoke of was no longer theoretical. I was already standing in it. Standing there with the skyline stretching beneath us. I felt the weight of every decision I had not known was being made on my behalf. The glass reflected two versions of reality side by side. The city I had always lived in and the layer beneath it that I had just stepped into. "You said others still exist," I repeated quietly. "People who disagreed with my father." Adrian did not move away from the window. "Yes," he said. "They adapted. They always do." The certainty in his tone told me this was not speculation. It was experience. I turned to face him fully. "Are they watching me?" The question sounded dramatic in my own ears, but it did not feel unreasonable. Adrian studied me carefully before answering. "Not directly," he said. "Not yet." My stomach tightened. "That is not comforting." A faint shift crossed his expression, something almost like understanding. "Comfort is not the objective," he replied. "Preparation is." The word preparation settled heavily between us. I thought about my apartment, my morning routine, the grocery store 3 blocks away, the predictable rhythm of my life. It all suddenly felt exposed. "What changes now?" I asked. Adrian walked toward a long table near the center of the room where a thin folder rested. He opened it and slid a single sheet of paper toward me. It was not dramatic. No classified stamp. No bold headlines. Just a list of dates. Dates from 14 years ago. Dates that aligned with tax filings, property transfers, legal consultations. My father's handwriting appeared in the margins of one scanned document. Notes, observations, corrections. He documented everything, Adrian said quietly. He believed transparency was protection. I traced my finger along one of the dates. And this documentation prevented assumptions, I said slowly. Adrian nodded. It prevented narratives from hardening into facts. I looked up at him. And if those narratives had hardened? He met my gaze without hesitation. My life would have followed a very different path. The air in the room felt still, controlled, as if even the sunlight respected boundaries here. You keep speaking about your life, I said. But what about mine? Adrian closed the folder gently. Your life remains yours, he said. Unless someone attempts to leverage your father's decision for influence. I felt that word land. Influence. You mean pressure? I corrected softly. He did not argue. The silence stretched again, but this time it felt charged rather than uncertain. I walked back toward the window, looking down at the streets below. From this height, everything seemed orderly. Lines, patterns, predictable motion. Yet beneath that order were choices, alliances, rivalries I had never imagined. If someone approaches me, I said slowly, what do they want? Adrian's reflection appeared beside mine once more. They would want access, he said. To me. Through you. The simplicity of that answer struck deeper than any elaboration. I closed my eyes briefly. So I am not the target, I murmured. I am the bridge. Adrian did not correct me. When I opened my eyes again, the city looked the same, but I no longer felt small within it. I felt positioned. Then tell me the truth, I said, turning to face him fully. If I walk away right now and refuse to be part of this world, what happens? Adrian held my gaze, steady and unyielding. Then I protect you anyway, he said quietly. And for the first time since I stepped into this building, I realized that walking away would not undo what had already begun. His answer did not feel like control. It felt like inevitability. I stood there in the quiet of his office, the city humming 30 floors below us, and realized that protection was not a cage unless I chose to make it one. You protect me anyway, I repeated softly, even if I refuse to stand beside you. Adrian's expression did not change, but something steadied in his posture. Yes, he said, because your father did not ask me to negotiate. The honesty in that statement unsettled me more than any threat could have. I walked away from the window, needing distance from the view, from the scale of everything. You talk about this like it is simple, I said. Like I am just a variable in an equation that has already been solved. Adrian stepped toward the long table again, resting one hand against the polished surface. It is not simple, he said. It is strategic. I let out a short breath that almost sounded like a laugh. That is not reassuring. He studied me carefully, as if measuring how much to reveal. There are individuals who believe my position should have evolved differently, he said. Your father's intervention redirected that evolution. They accepted it publicly. Privately, some did not. I crossed my arms. And they would use me to test that redirection. Yes, Adrian replied without hesitation. The clarity of his response stripped away any illusion I might have clung to. I looked down at the envelope still in my hand. My father had written that I was stronger than I realized. Strength felt abstract a few hours ago. Now it felt necessary. If I agree to stay informed, I said slowly, what does that actually mean? Adrian walked to a discreet console near the wall and pressed a button. A large screen illuminated quietly, displaying nothing dramatic, just news feeds, market movements, images of public events. It means you understand the landscape, he said. You recognize faces. You know names. You do not walk into rooms blind. I stared at the screen, at headlines that seemed ordinary but now felt layered. And if someone approaches me? I asked. You inform me immediately, he said. You do not engage alone. The firmness in his tone was not possessive. It was protective. There was a difference, and I felt it. You are very certain that someone will? I said quietly. Adrian did not deny it. Patterns repeat, he answered. I walked closer to the screen, watching the subtle shifts in numbers, the polished smiles at public events. None of it looked threatening. That was the point. My father believed in integrity, I said. Not intimidation. Adrian stepped beside me, keeping a respectful distance. So do I, he said. I turned sharply toward him. That is difficult to believe. His gaze held mine steadily. Integrity is not the absence of power, he replied. It is the discipline of how you use it. The room felt very still then, the hum of the building almost imperceptible. I searched his face for contradiction, for arrogance, for the shadow of something darker. Instead, I saw control. Control shaped by a promise. If I stay informed, I said carefully, it is not because I want to be part of your world. Adrian nodded once. It is because you refuse to be unprepared. The distinction mattered. I drew in a steady breath, feeling the weight of choice settle into something clearer. Then start with the names, I said. If I am standing at a crossroads, I want to see every sign. Adrian's eyes did not soften, but something in them shifted. Approval, perhaps. Very well, he said quietly. And as the first name appeared on the screen, I understood that knowledge was no longer optional. It was armor. The first name on the screen did not look dangerous. It looked respectable. Thomas Whitaker. Philanthropist. Board member. Public speaker. The kind of man whose photograph appeared beside headlines about charitable foundations and urban redevelopment. I stared at the image of him shaking hands with city officials, his smile polished and effortless. He disagreed with my father? I asked quietly. Adrian stood beside me, hands loosely clasped behind his back. He preferred a version of events that positioned him advantageously, he said. Your father corrected that version. I studied the timeline displayed beneath the photo. 14 years ago, Whitaker's company had been under investigation for irregular financial transfers. The dates aligned with the documents my father had annotated. So my father's documentation exposed inconsistencies, I said slowly. Yes, Adrian replied. Inconsistencies that redirected scrutiny. The word scrutiny felt clinical, almost harmless. Yet the implication was clear. My father had disrupted something carefully arranged. And he never told me. I whispered. Adrian's voice was steady. He intended for you to live without that burden. The screen shifted to the next name. Evelyn Mercer. Investor. Political donor. Her photograph showed her at a gala, diamonds catching the light, expression controlled. She supported Whitaker's position, Adrian said before I asked. Publicly neutral. Privately invested. I crossed my arms, absorbing the pattern. These were not shadowed figures operating in alleys. They were visible. Respected. The realization unsettled me more than anything else. They look legitimate, I said. They are, Adrian answered. Legitimacy is often a matter of presentation. I felt a strange mixture of anger and admiration. My father had stood against individuals who operated in rooms I had never entered, and he had done so quietly, methodically, without drama. Why did they accept it publicly? I asked. Adrian's gaze remained on the screen. Because evidence is persuasive, he said. And because confronting your father directly would have invited attention they did not want. I thought about my father's meticulous filing cabinets, the way he labeled everything with precise handwriting. It had not been simple organization. It had been strategy. The screen shifted again, this time displaying a network diagram. Lines connecting names. Meetings. Shared investments. Nothing illegal on the surface. Just influence layered carefully over time. You said patterns repeat. I murmured. What pattern do you see now? Adrian looked at me instead of the screen. Renewed alliances, he said. Subtle conversations. Invitations extended that were not extended before. I felt a tightening in my chest. Because they believe enough time has passed, I said. He nodded. Time softens memory, he said. But not ambition. The word ambition lingered. I stepped closer to the screen, studying the connections. I did not feel fear. I felt awakening. If they approach me, I said slowly, it will not be with threats. No, Adrian agreed. It will be with opportunity. The precision of that answer sent a chill through me. Opportunity. A meeting. A foundation board invitation. A charitable partnership. Nothing dramatic. Just access. I looked at the names again, at the polished faces smiling from event photographs. They will not see me as a person, I said quietly. They will see me as leverage. Adrian's gaze softened slightly, though his posture remained firm. They will underestimate you, he said. I turned toward him, holding his eyes steadily. That would be a mistake, I replied. And as the next name illuminated on the screen, I understood that knowledge had already begun to shift me from symbol to participant. The next name illuminated on the screen, but I barely saw it. Something inside me had shifted from reaction to calculation. If they underestimate me, I said slowly, keeping my eyes on the web of connections, then that is an advantage. Adrian did not smile, but approval flickered briefly in his expression. It can be, he said, if you remain disciplined. Disciplined. The word echoed differently now. My father had been disciplined. Quiet routines. Careful documentation. Calm responses even when frustrated. I used to think it was just personality. Now I saw it as training by example. What would an approach look like? I asked. An invitation, Adrian replied. A fundraiser. A board position. A conversation framed as mentorship. I nodded slightly. That made sense. Polished people offering polished opportunities. And if I accept? I asked. Adrian studied me carefully. Then you observe, he said. You listen more than you speak. You commit to nothing without reflection. I crossed my arms, thinking. You want me inside their circle. It was not an accusation. It was clarity. Adrian did not deny it. I want you informed, he said. Information is power when handled correctly. I walked slowly around the long table, glancing again at the names glowing on the screen. My father stepped into your world to correct something, I said quietly. He did not belong to it. Adrian's voice remained steady. He belonged to his principles, he said. That is why he mattered. I stopped moving. That was the core of it. My father had not changed worlds. He had applied his values to one that needed them. If I step into this, I said slowly, I am not doing it for loyalty to you. Adrian's gaze held mine. I would not expect that, he said. Then understand this. I continued, my voice firm. If I walk into any room, it will be on my terms. Not as leverage. Not as bait. A faint pause, then a nod. Agreed, Adrian replied. The simplicity of his agreement steadied me more than resistance would have. I moved closer to the screen again, memorizing faces, mapping connections in my mind. You said renewed alliances, I murmured. How soon before they test the waters? Adrian glanced toward a discreet panel on the wall where a phone rested. Soon, he said, as if summoned by the word. The phone vibrated softly against the wood surface. The sound was not loud, but it cut through the room with precision. Adrian's eyes shifted to it, then back to me. He did not rush to answer. He waited. The phone vibrated again. My pulse quickened, not from fear, but from recognition. This was what preparation felt like. Not chaos. Not panic. Awareness. Is that one of them? I asked quietly. Adrian inclined his head slightly. It is an invitation, he said. The word landed exactly as he had predicted. I held his gaze, feeling something settle inside me that had not been there this morning. Resolve. Answer it, I said, but put it on speaker. Adrian's expression sharpened, not surprised, but assessing. Then he picked up the phone and pressed a single button. As the line connected and a smooth, familiar voice began to speak, I realized that whatever crossroads I had imagined earlier was no longer ahead of me. I was standing in the middle of it. The voice on the other end of the line was smooth, confident, practiced. Adrian, it said warmly, as if they were discussing golf scores instead of influence. I hope I am not interrupting. Adrian did not look at me when he answered. You rarely call without intention, Thomas. The faintest pause followed, the kind that measured reaction. Direct as always, Thomas Whitaker replied with a soft chuckle. I was hoping to extend an invitation. A private dinner this Thursday. A few familiar faces. An opportunity to reconnect. Reconnect. The word hovered in the air like a polite disguise. I stepped closer to the phone, close enough that my voice would carry clearly. That sounds thoughtful, I said evenly. There was a brief silence on the line. Not confusion. Calculation. And who might I have the pleasure of addressing? Whitaker asked smoothly. Charlotte Hayes, I replied. I did not rush the name. I let it settle. Another pause. Slightly longer this time. Ah, he said, tone shifting just enough to reveal recognition. Michael Hayes's daughter. Yes, I said simply. I believe you knew my father. The silence that followed was different. Not awkward. Waited. Your father was a principled man, Whitaker said carefully. He believed in transparency. I met Adrian's gaze as the word transparency echoed back from 14 years ago. He did, I said. He also believed in accountability. There it was again. A subtle shift in tone. Indeed, Whitaker replied. That is precisely why I thought it might be beneficial for us to meet. In the spirit of collaboration. Collaboration. I could almost see the polished table, the measured smiles. I am always open to conversations grounded in integrity, I said calmly. Thursday works. Adrian's eyes sharpened slightly, but he did not interrupt. Excellent. Whitaker said, warmth returning as if nothing had sharpened beneath it. 7 o'clock. I will have the details sent over. Please do, I answered. The line disconnected with a soft click. The room felt still again, but not uncertain. Charged. Adrian set the phone down slowly. That was quicker than anticipated, he said. You predicted soon, I replied. You were right. He studied me, searching for hesitation. You handled that well, he said quietly. I shook my head once. I handled it honestly, I corrected. I walked back to the window, the city now glowing in late afternoon light. Cars moved below, unaware of the conversation that had just taken place 30 floors above them. They will test me, I said. Yes, Adrian replied. I turned to face him fully, feeling something settle into place inside me. Then let them, I said. The envelope rested securely in my coat pocket, the letter folded against my heart. My father had chosen integrity over convenience. I would do the same. You understand, Adrian said slowly, that this dinner will not be simple. I held his gaze steadily. Neither was the choice my father made, I replied. Silence followed, but it did not feel heavy. It felt aligned. The skyline outside shifted as the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across glass and steel. I thought about the cemetery, the ring against stone, the promise spoken in quiet tones. Debt is paid, but some debts are not settled with money or visits. Some are carried forward in the choices we make next. And as I stood there, no longer unaware, I realized that my father had not left me unprepared. He had left me positioned.